All right, welcome everyone. In this last video for the module that we're working with all right, welcome everyone. In this video, I'm going to wrap up the materials that are covered in this Colab notebook, which is linked in the description of this video. And so the very last command I want to discuss is the unite function from the tidyr package, which is like the opposite of the separate function that we just talked about. And so if you want the code cells below to run, if you want to access the table 5 and the functions from the tidyr package, the easiest way to get all of them running is to load the tidyverse with library tidyverse. And let's consider the data in table 5, which I've just loaded with this first code cell below. And this is like a weird data set. We've got the century in one column, and we've got the kind of year in another column. And you can imagine that you wouldn't want to have your year separated into two separate columns, that you would want to have one column for a year that just had 1999. And I'll also say, like, another really common situation where this comes up. Here, we're just using this table because it is sticking with the theme of the country data and the tuberculosis data. But like oftentimes, if you're a teacher like me and you're dealing with students in your class and you're downloading spreadsheets of student names, sometimes that spreadsheet will have a column that has last name, a separate column that has first name, and you might want to join those two columns and just have one column that has like last comma first as a single cell. So you can do things like join names in any order. So you could join it so that it would be first and then last name and so on. So I'm sure that you can use your imagination. You've worked with data sets in the past, and imagine situations where you had information that was split up into multiple columns, and you wanted that information merged into a single column. And that's what the unite function is going to allow us to do. In this case, I'm going to unite the century and the year columns together and create one column, which I also call year. And that function, again, is called unite. And so, like any good function in the tidyverse, the very first input is a data frame. Usually it's a tibble, actually. But here we're going to input table 5. We're going to pipe it into the unite function. And here for the column, we don't kind of enter these inside of a vector like we did over here. So I want to be careful that what we specify over here is, first we're going to enter the name of the column that we're going to create. So I'm going to create a new column that I call year. And maybe this is confusing because we've got two columns that are called year. So just to clarify that, I'm going to call this year new. And then we have a list of all of the columns that we're going to merge together to create this new column. So it could be 2 columns, it could be 3 columns, it could be 4 columns. You could join together any number of columns that you want. In our case, I'm going to join century and year together. So it's just 2. And then you would indicate a separator if you want one in between those joined values. I don't want any separator, so I'm not going to indicate any. And then we're good to go. And I'll run this code cell. You can see the output is a tibble, and out came new variable that we called year new that had 1999 that came from taking century and then year. And if you want to play around with some of these, you can see what would happen if we did some other things. So for example, if I did year and then century and then country, well, that would do something weird. Oh, I need a comma over here. So if I did something like this, okay, this did something weird, right? It combined year, century, and country in that order. So it created a new variable called year new by combining things in this order. It first took year, it then took century, and then took the country and created some weird thing that looks like 99, 19, Afghanistan. Okay, that's what we told it to do. If I wanted to put a separator, I could put a separator of any kind that I wanted to. So here I choose my separator to be a comma, a couple of spaces, a comma, another couple of spaces, and so on. And that's just going to say, hey, it's going to go up, pick off the year, because that's the first thing it says to do. Then put this big separator down, then go into century, then add another separator, then go into country, go over there. And you can customize this in other ways if you wanted to. But for example, you could imagine if you had a column that had last name, you had a column that had first name, a natural thing would be to take last, comma, space, first, and combine it in that way. So that's how you could play around with the unite function to combine columns. This command over here would have been a more natural way to unite them by just joining the century and the year without a separator. That looks pretty good. Question 2 down below is saying that this output is not quite tidy. So because of this issue with the rate, this has two values in a single cell over here. So how could we next take the code that we have over here, and what would be the next step in tidying this up? Well, the next thing we would want to do after kind of combining these two together to get a single year would be to split this column up, to separate this column up like we did in the previous operation to take this rate column and split it into two separate columns for cases and population. So I could just combine that with the previous separate command that we had, which was right here. So now I'm going to pipe this output right into another separate command. So this would take that output that we had from the previous command, and this is what's going to be input right into the separate command. And this separate command is going to say, okay, take this result now, separate the rate column into two different variables that we call case and population using the separator, this slash. And this now takes table 5, which looked like this, and does a series of two operations. It combined, it united the century and the year into one column, and it separated the rate into two different columns. And now we get a nice tidy version of that data where we've got year in one column and we've got the cases in the population split up into two separate columns. Okay, so that is a wrap on some of the functions in tidyr that we can use to tidy up our data. And you'll have some homework problems to practice working on those operations as well as working with the dplyr package that we talked about in the previous module. Thanks, everyone.